easy A that he called it. And so I totally fell in love with all the design programs because I was a computer, like I just loved computers. So that sort of turned things around for me. And I really learned all of the typography and the drawing and all that stuff really by trial by fire in college when I went. And I was like the worst one ever. My self-portrait looked like a monkey, like at the beginning of the year. Like it was so crazy, like the amount that I had to overcome because everybody else was art students, but I was just this computer person who was not allowed to touch a computer my first year of college back then. So I fell into it totally by accident, but I just love the design programs and the computer part of it, and the other stuff I had to train myself for. So that's kind of how I started. So
I think this is a good question for each one of you. Imani, you want to answer that? What made you want to get into design?
Yeah, sure. Recently, not too long ago, I read a book called "Start with Why" by Simon Sinek,
Mhm.
and it talks about basically finding your purpose and why you do whatever it is you do. And I found that the reason why I design is like I'm looking to serve people. So, design is just a tool that I use to serve other people, whether it's small businesses or clients that I work in the newspaper business. So I'm helping other people in the office, whether it's editorial staff or sales staff. That's the reason why I design specifically, because I'm trying to help other people solve problems. And just like Melissa, I started in high school too. But a lot of it was self-taught. Like we had at Whitmer High School here in Toledo, Ohio, we had access to, Apple computers and a lot of the, back in the olden days, the macromedia programs and stuff like that, and Adobe programs. So that's where I, got my start. And from there, I was actually, teaching myself a lot of these programs, even in college, on top of the classes and things like that. So that's basically where I got my start.
Thank you. Rob, you want to answer that?
I took art in high school and loved it. And I remember sitting with my art teacher and asking, what could I do with this? Like, it seemed like the options were to be a fine artist, to teach art. Those are the ones that I knew right off the top of my head. But she said so that she could consider either graphic design or architecture, actually. And I chose design because I wanted to be in an art school. And in art school, I loved, quite honestly, like I think I enjoyed like other classes. Like I took I was a metalsmith minor, and I loved photography, and I liked sculpture and glass blowing and more of the, like a lot of the 3D art stuff actually. But when it came time to get a job, I definitely felt like my design degree was the most marketable skill I had. And my wife and I would go to bookstores and flip through annuals and flip through, well, she wasn't flipping through annuals, she was reading other stuff, but I was just browsing design books. And I really discovered there was a whole world of things that I hadn't really pursued in college. Partly, I graduated from Bowling Green State University in 2000. So I was there from 1996 to 2000. And just the internet didn't have the kind of resources to like see what other people were doing as much then. And so you had to be a lot more proactive to even have a good sense of what the industry looked like. And so like print and communication arts and things like that were things that you would look back then to find out what work people were doing. But I didn't look at that stuff in college. And so it was kind of after college, I was like, actually, there's a lot of fun opportunities here. And I really relate to what Imani was saying about liking solving problems. Like on the Enneagram, I'm a helper. And I've discovered that doing client work, working in an agency is a really great place for a person who likes to help people, because that's all you're doing. Is you have clients coming to you with a new problem every day to solve. So
kind of going off of that question, your answer though to that, how do you suggest students today gain experience if they've never had an internship, or that inspiration to kind of go out and find that first internship? Rob, you want to?
Sure. There was a short film I just watched that was fantastic. It was called You Make Videos? ? I don't know if anybody has seen that. It won a bunch of awards. But in the middle of it, there's like this in classic storytelling form, you could probably just jump right to the very middle of the video and watch this little clip. And the main character turns to camera and he talks about making spec work. And it's like a really good explanation of how like there's no reason why you can't just make stuff. You don't have to have clients paying you for it. In fact, I mean, honestly, even in the agency world, some of the best things that a lot of agencies have in their portfolio might be things that they've done for free or for very little money. And so there's no reason why you can't do that too for clients that aren't even talking to you about things. So like, I think that making anything is the most important thing. I think agencies often look for relevant work to what they do. And so if you have an idea of the kind of field you want to go into, just pick a client and make fake stuff for them. I mean, that's what you're doing in college anyway. But the more stuff that looks like it's real, the better chance you have of convincing people you can solve problems.
Does anyone else want to tag on to that? Melissa, you're shaking your head a lot to that.
No, I mean, that's completely what I would say. I mean, it's funny because I do a lot of restaurant works and hotel work, and I've always loved doing that kind of stuff and just finding my purpose by like creating memories and creating experiences that through details and storytelling for that. So it's the same thing. Like, I mean, I can't tell you, there's been so many times where I've just sort of created little projects to put in because I'm like, I really love doing restaurants. So I need a few more to round it out. Like, even if like it's might be the best design, like if you don't want to do, say, annual report design, don't put it in your portfolio because you're going to get hired based on what's in your portfolio already. So, I mean, and it's not lying. You can have full transparency in an interview or when somebody asks you that questions. Did you do this on a team? Yes, here was my role. What was this project? Oh, this was something, it actually shows initiative and like that, like, yeah, I made up this project and I did it in my spare time just because I have a passion for it. Like that speaks so much volumes as to the kind of person and hard worker that you are anyways, let alone you get to do something without the parameters and budgets of traditional clients. So if that's the stuff that you want to do, whether it's wedding invitations or logo design or whatever, make up your own project, put some limits on it too. Like find yourself like, how can I print something on, for this amount of money in a creative, unusual way? And that stuff will stand out far and above some of the stuff that you had to do a certain way. And, so there you go.
This is a question for either all three of you, but kind of going off what you were saying, Melissa, we have students nowadays with this pandemic that they're doing interviews just like we are today through Zoom and other things. And so what projects, if they were going to show them, would you want to see through a digital portfolio? Do you think it would be different than, the traditional portfolio that we were used to seeing when you dragged it along with you? Or do you think everything should be digital no matter what? Kind of playing off that. Anyone? What do you see? What's important in that digital portfolio? What's going to sell that student?
I can't speak for everybody, but I'm not sure if it would be all that different now compared to before. Regardless of how I see the portfolio, I'm looking for someone that's going to fit what we do, here, like for instance, with editorial design at a newspaper. I'm looking for someone who can work in that environment. So I'm looking for examples of, building ads, page layouts. I'm looking for someone who can do a lot of grunt work, at times. And so that's what the type of content I'm looking for. I like the analogy of a sports team. If anybody's followed sports, that that like teams, like in basketball, they have very specific needs. So they may just need someone who can shoot from the perimeter. They may need someone who's big and who can block. So they're looking for very specific things from very specific people. And like a portfolio is the same way. It's like I'm looking for something very specific from each person. And so sometimes it might be good to do your homework before you interview, and like finding out what the people that you're interviewing in front of, like what their needs are, like some of their basic needs, what are their strong suits, the things that they do very well, and see if you can help them to accomplish those goals better. So if you talking to a firm that specializes in logo designs, show them your logos, show them the programs that you work with, show them your sketches, your original ideas behind those logos and that work too. I think that's important, not just the polish. There's a lot of stock material that you could put together, any number of different things, but I think it'd be good to show, your whole process, from start to finish. You're drawing this thing out, sketching things out, brainstorming, the whole process. I think is very helpful.
Thank you.
If I can I add something? So I think a lot about deliverables and format. So all I do for a living now is make film and video for people, 99% of the time. And like one of the things that you think about when you're making film and video is literally the output. So like aspect ratios and things like that. Like a weird thing about the digital world right now with interviewing is like even what we're doing right now is you're going to be through a screen. And so my hunch is that it's going to be, like a 16:9 screen like this. And just to think like, you're probably also going to be showing your work in the context of a browser window and toolbars and other things that will distract who you're talking to. So when I had one of my first jobs, and I did do more print, and I would work on outdoor things. There was one of the account executives at the firm that I worked for. He would do this. He would call it the drive-by test. And basically, he would ask you to print out your billboard design, and you put it on like the side of your cubicle, and then he'd sit you in your chair. It was really humiliating, and he would push you by like down the aisle, and he would be like, "Now, what did you see? What did you remember?" Because his point was like, you just probably only caught the headline and maybe the logo, but if you have like a little website on there and you have like all these little details on an outdoor board, like you just aren't going to get it. Not that showing your work over Zoom is the same exact thing as an outdoor board, but it's sort of similar in some ways. Like the person interviewing you isn't going to be like necessarily spending 15 minutes to read your copy. Now, that said, there probably shouldn't be anything wrong with your copy, but you shouldn't be hinging everything you're showing on like really nuanced, like subtle things about your work. Is at least my impression. Also, as we experienced at the beginning of this call or this Zoom, some things don't play back great, right?
Yeah.
And like, don't fumble through. Don't set yourself up for like fumbling. No, sorry, this is sound like I'm critiquing the folks who are doing this presentation, and I'm not. It's just hard. It's really hard. Sorry, Kelly. It's hard when you're in the moment to like get all that stuff right. So make sure that you are like ready to win, ready to succeed, setting yourself up for making your presentation fly. And videos might not play back really great. So think, do I need to embed a link where they can play it back on their end? I got real specific on that. Sorry.
Maybe.
It seems like I was passionate about like digital interviewing there, and I'm really not.
I think most of the time though that you'll be sending them a link of the entire website probably beforehand, and they'll have time to look over it and review it. But if you're talking about with that student, that specific video or something, be ready to have that play well. So I think that's a good point. We are in the world of a pandemic, and a lot of the times we're trying to figure out, and as learners, students, we're kind of thinking of them. They're trying to figure out what can they focus on in this time of a pandemic when they're, not in classes and doing, what should they be focusing on? What skills sets should they be focusing on in this pandemic to improve upon?
what skill sets should you not be working on? I mean, that's if you have a lull, I mean, take some classes online, I mean, there's so many great virtual classes online right now. So, you know, work on like showing versatility. Take a photography class if you've never taken photography. Work on like some typography or like calligraphy skills or anything that can just add to the layers and the dimensions of the design work. Like I love to sort of just take a sidestep to something that's completely unrelated to design because it's inevitably going to get woven into a design somewhere in the span of my career. Like it just keeps happening. So this is the opportunity, if you have that luxury of any downtime, to just play and have fun and like try new things and experiment. I mean, I think pivoting is what every client is doing. It's like the golden word of the year. So showing that versatility both in your portfolio and just developing other skills that just complement design, but maybe aren't design, it's all going to lead to a better, you know, range of projects that you present. So
Anyone else want to chime in with that?
Yeah, yeah, I just echoing that statement is that right now, this learning has been revolutionized, period. There's going to be far more, just because, you know, you may be going back to school and you might not be in a virtual environment anymore. This virtual environment is still going to be a thing. And there are going to be tons of opportunities to not just learn virtually, but there's a new thing now with certifications. When it comes to design and stuff like that, that's going to be more of a common thing. So there's going to be tons of opportunities for you to learn skills and gain skills outside of the traditional learning environment that can add to your portfolio. So just like, and I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm actually encouraged by a lot of that. Also, I was like, I teach comic book classes, and a lot of times, you know, a good number of the kids already have taught themselves how to animate already just through watching YouTube videos. They've taught themselves they've created their own web comics. So they're very I'm very encouraged by this generation for sure, because they've been very self-motivated into, you know, teaching themselves. And when I look at that, I see that learning in and of itself will change drastically, because you have a generation of people that have made it a habit to be self-taught. They're teaching themselves any number of different skills without traditional instruction. So what you're going to see is that, yeah, there's, you know, being in front of an instructor and getting instruction directly is great, but I would take full advantage of as much learning as you can on your own. There's tons of websites out there that are, and tons of people out there that are just willing to give you information and ways that you can improve your portfolio and create things that, you know, aren't going to be necessarily presented to you in the classroom. So I'm very actually encouraged by that. That's really taken off exponentially during this time.
Do any of you guys have any website recommendations for the continued education or continued learning? Like I sometimes recommend to my students like treehouse.com or lynda.com or things like that, but do you guys have any that you would encourage students, or even like they're in the field for a couple of years now and they're kind of stagnant? What would you kind of recommend? Any websites or anything learning besides YouTube?
I'm obsessed with Skillshare, which is a website. They've got all kinds of cool, and they've got the range of like, whether it's client business things, but it's really got a design spin to it. I'm obsessed with it, but I have not taken a class yet. I've looked at all the previews and I keep saying bookmark, 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 but I still have not signed up for it yet. So that's, you know, someday when I don't have small children and running a business, but that website is definitely super cool. But there's so many of them out there that are similar to that. Even Masterclass, it's like, that's for like all kinds of different industries, but you can find some really inspirational big names out there that you can really learn a lot from through some of those classes where they're teaching them in your home essentially. So
I have a question that's not kind of on here, but a lot of our students kind of focus on one area. Sometimes they'll focus on print, or they'll focus on web, and they'll focus on animation or something like that. Do you think that you know, if they focus on one area and have a little bit of knowledge in those other areas, that you would still hire them if you were seeking an intern or something like that? I mean, because, you know, they're not going to have all the skill sets and they're learning. That's kind of what I'm getting at. And so would you hire someone who's, okay, I'm a print person, but I'm interested in video, but I've never done video. Would you help teach me? Would you guys do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that like I didn't do any video in college at all, for example. I'd learned all on the job. But I think that I get a little bit worried when people overly stress how much they want to learn from me. And I don't mean that in a weird way, but like I mean that in like I want to see people who want to learn on their own, because as a small company, like that's what I'm most interested in, is people who like take initiative to learn on their own. So like, but Madhouse was started by 3 of us who were all designers first. And so I think like graphic design skills and being able to think and solve problems can be like that can translate into all kinds of things for sure.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that too.
Sure, go ahead, Imani.
No, I was just noticing that I'm old, so I started using Micromedia back in the day, but what was interesting is that everything I learned from one program typically translated into others too. And so, especially now, I notice is that the technology everything is sort of WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get type of formats or platforms. So if you're really good at like for instance, if you're really good at Illustrator, then you shouldn't have any problem in InDesign. You shouldn't have any problem in Illustrator and those things like that. So if you learn the suites, the typical design suite, Adobe Design Suite or any of those, design suites or packages, then you shouldn't have too much of a problem, even if you wanted to transition into creating video or creating digital files and stuff like that. The way I've noticed the technology is now, everything seems to translate. All the quick keys, for instance, are pretty much the same. So if you can, I think it's helpful that if you have a strong foundation in the basics of, composition and understanding, something as simple as lighting or color, theory and all those traditional basic elements, then you shouldn't have a problem transitioning into any number of different aspects. Because what I've noticed is that regardless of where the particular industry has started in, there's chances are they're now looking to branch out into something else. Like I work in newspaper, but this pandemic has definitely made the company I work for a digital company. They have to, immediately on a drop of a dime, have to transition all that stuff into web design, websites and things like that. So I wouldn't be too, I'm just saying all that to say, don't be too discouraged. Like if you don't have a huge amount of experience in one particular field or another, that I feel like the technology is set up so that, if you have a really strong base in one particular program, you could definitely transition that over into another.
And just to expand on that a little bit too, because I have a lot of experience with this. When I went to college, I was just figuring out, how to hold a pencil, for gosh sakes. But like when I did the internships, I didn't know what field I went into. So my first internship was at a fashion advertising place in Boston. My second one was with an architectural firm where I did signage. The next one was with a package design firm where I designed grocery store packaging. And so there's something about finding not just all that experience and trying things out. Do I like this? Do I not? But like that served me well now, because I design for brands where I'm doing the signage, I'm doing the website, I'm doing the print, I'm doing the logo. And it really I pull that inspiration from a lot of the other, like, I'm not going to do this logo because it's never going to look good on a sign. I make sure that I make the whole thing work well. So if somebody wants to try a field that they've never done, by all means do it. Like, even if you decide that you hate doing, you know, whatever it is, digital at some point as you try it, at least you then have that experience to make all your other designs function a lot better for that brand. So
kind of pulling off, you know, some of the things you guys are saying. One of the questions on here is, why is make the logo bigger such a significant long running joke?
I couldn't wait for this question, but go ahead.
I saw that big smile.
You know what,
there you go.
I'll take it real quick. I think, you know, what's so funny. I think where it comes from is that, all right, so I graduated from high school in '93, right? So like from that point on, with that, this is a quick history lesson, I guess. So because of the technology is so accessible now, you don't just have people that are coming out of college that do design, you have people that are just hobbyists that do design too. And what I notice is that now designers are far more accessible to clients. And so they have conversations directly with them. And because they don't understand design, they just say the first thing that comes to their head, which is make the logo bigger or make it pop, or I'm looking for something edgy, or any number of different, you know, things that aren't technical design terms that would help me as a designer figure this thing out. They're just communicating what they feel, what they, you know, from their gut. And is that like typically you have more professional conversations with other designers to figure that thing out. But I think that now when this time, since clients are so in front of designers directly, then you have these weird conversations about making it pop and make it larger and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Imani. That's a very good analogy of that. I agree with you 100%. What are some of the new emerging skills, though? We're talking about this pandemic. We're encouraging students to go out there and learn some different skills. What are some of those skills that you would recommend?
One of the things that I think is a emerging skill is working in 3D. And so, and it's not just for video or for, you know, architecture or CAD, it's like for print too. A lot of the stuff I see, like even we work for a lot of clients that do like automotive or industrial applications, or, you know, Thermatrue is a client of ours that we do some work for. And this year has meant shooting things in person has been more difficult. But even for like stills and renders for some of our clients' websites and things like that, the stuff that you can do in 3D is almost indecipherable from actual photography. But then from a graphic design perspective, there's just all kinds of fun things you can do in 3D that I think open up. It's like more complicated, I think. Of the software that I know how to use, doing work in Cinema 4D is probably the most in-depth. But it's super accessible, and it keeps getting more accessible. And the learning tools that are out there, like one of the ones that when you asked earlier about what sites, like Grayscale Gorilla has been a place where I've gone forever to learn about 3D stuff, but they keep getting better. And now it's like subscription based, but yeah, there's tons of cool tools that you can use for print as well as everything else.
Anyone else want to jump in on that? So I don't see many questions coming in. So if anyone has any questions from the audience that want to go ahead and ask them in the next few minutes here, we're going to start taking those questions. So if you do have any, go ahead and type the message, kind of write those in. What would you guys, besides design, not even talking about design at this point, what would you, in an interview, what would make you hire an intern, regardless of what their portfolio is? It could be a great portfolio. Let's just imagine it is. But, you know, you've got 3 other candidates that are amazing. What would make you pick between those 3 candidates for that intern? What Anyone?
Well, I think sometimes it's also, I mean, you want to see versatility in a portfolio. Like you want, especially now with the pandemic, I mean, like everything's flipped upside down. So you have to find creative ways to do everything that you've done for the last 20 years or whatever. But versatility, somebody who can sort of fill in different gaps or you think, I hate to say outside the box, but there you go. You know, people that can just come up with completely off the wall solutions to things. But I am a stickler for the details, like whether it's if there's a typo, I'm just like, oh, seriously, you just put this in a job interview, like there's a huge typo staring at me. So I'm all about details. But then I think the most important thing is also that personal connection. You want to feel like you can bounce ideas back and forth with them, have a conversation with them. Like you don't want them to just be, you know, like just, you know, designing and there's no social right now we need social interaction with people. So you want to feel a personal connection with somebody. I mean, I had my very first job interview out of college. I ended up getting a flat tire right before I got there. And I moved mountains. I like did everything to get this stupid flat tire fixed just so I could get on like the train to get there. And I got there with 5 minutes to spare. And it was one of those things, I was so intimidated going into this interview, but by the time I got there and I sat in front of my interviewee, I was just like, you would not believe the morning I had. And we had this great like sort of banter before the interview actually started. And I think that personal connection is what probably gave me an advantage because, you know, it was just easy to talk to one another. So I think that's a huge, communication is big across the board with everything we do. So having that communication with the people that you're interviewing with or your eventual boss is kind of important. So
Thank you. Either Rob or Imani, do you want to comment on that? What do you look for in an intern? We've got these students in here kind of going to be doing that interns on interviews on Saturday. So I want to kind of hype them up a little bit to get them ready. Go ahead.
Your willingness or ability to, you know, work and collaborate with other people. I think it's like a big thing, at least for me and what I do, because so much of what we do isn't for myself. I'm doing it for somebody else, typically. And so your ability to, you know, communicate that you are here to help, as opposed to like necessarily showing a portfolio that shows your own personal. I hate to say this, but I'm not necessarily looking for a portfolio that shows their own personal style as much as their ability to meet the demands of whoever else they were working with. So that type of thing, their ability to, you know, basically work with other people and collaborate.
Okay. Rob, nothing?
No, yeah. I feel like being the kind of person that the person sitting across from you would want to spend time with. Like think about asking questions, think about humility, think about being kind, being a good person, you know, like I think that the reality is if you work with somebody, you're going to spend a lot of your day with them. And
Yeah.
so
Sitting across from someone who just doesn't talk back to you or talk to you or interact with you probably won't get them a second interview.
Right.
Let's see. I think we have time for some questions. Some people are getting some questions. One of the questions is, what, if any, project management systems do you use to stay organized and meet deadlines? Anyone?
I am currently using Toggle.
Toggle.
Toggl. It's basically I use it to, you know, track my time and track the projects that I'm working on. Now that I've been working from home, like what's odd is that I used to, you know, go into the office and actually literally punch a clock, you know, which is like clock my hours. Now I'm literally using my phone to track that time. So Toggle is a program that I've been using.
Melissa,
for billing, I use like FreshBooks, like to keep track of my times. I've used that forever, but I'm such a dinosaur. I mean, I think obviously since I don't have a whole team, like I've worked with Basecamp, we do Slack on the AAF board. But I'm such a dinosaur that on any given day, you're going to find like a ridiculous amount of like check boxes here. And I have some digitally. I have a lot because I'm just a hands-on person. I like to write it out. And then when my day gets crazy and that goes to heck, I just like rewrite it all like as nicely as possible. So I feel motivated to check things off. But over the years, I've found like weird systems to it. It's like, okay, I'm not scratching it off if I just sent it to the client or the printer. I'm like shadowing in the box because I know I got to make sure that's still on my to-do list. So I follow up if I don't hear from them in a few days, so you just do whatever works best for you. For some people, it's technology. For me, I'm on technology all day long. So I like to have a printed page. So, you'll find different ways. And especially if you work on a team, then you all have to collaborate together. So it's whatever is the easiest for everybody to navigate, really.
We use Basecamp. I have a checklist, a digital checklist. And Melissa, it's funny because I will literally put things on my checklist after I've done them so that I can check them off. You know what I mean? That satisfaction of clicking that, saying it's done. Even if it means I have to I would, instead of shading it in, I'd check it off the list and then retype, follow up with printer.
Yeah. Feels good to check it off, right? I don't know.
Yeah. I use checklists. I have a bunch of them as well. So yeah, I'm probably more like most old school checklists for like grading things and so forth too. We have a really great question from another participant. She says, thank you for all the great advice so far. Do you guys ever find yourself in a creative rut for your design occupation or personal designing? And if so, what methods do you use to get out of that rut?
It's similar to like a lot of, you hear advice like this when it comes to writing, is that basically all writing is bad. You sort of just have to keep writing until it's good. Mm-hmm. So it's like design is similar, and it's like in my particular position, I have the advantage of someone is going to come along and tell me that what I did wasn't working, so it's like they're going to continue to push me to push this design forward. So oddly enough, accountability helps, knowing that I have a deadline or knowing that someone else is waiting on something or they have a particular vision that they want to see in this design. So in a weird sort of way, that pressure helps me to move out of that rut. I find that when I'm working on something that's personal to me, it's far harder to get out of that rut because no one else is holding me accountable but myself. So I immediately tell myself, oh, you can set this aside for later, or you can come back to that tomorrow, and that type of thing. Whereas when it comes to work, when it comes to designing for work, those time limits and other people being involved and other people looking for things actually help me to not necessarily work faster, but work, in some cases work smarter. And actually helps me to work my way out of that rut.
Thank you, Imani.
And also knowing that it doesn't have to be perfect, that knowing, figuring out what's good enough is actually far more helpful than trying to figure out what's going to be the perfect answer. So definitely learning. And I think that's a big learning curve when it comes to whenever doing internship, is figuring out what the median is, rather as opposed to what the pinnacle is of a certain situation. So yeah,
I'm sure you guys don't want to be hounded by your interns. Is this good enough? Is this good enough? Is this good enough? Is this it? Is this it? Like I do for my students. Here's a good question. What kind of music or playlist do you guys use when you're working on a project? Or are you silent? It's got to be quiet kind of atmosphere. Anyone?
I'm silent.
You're silent?
Because the next thing you know, I'm singing along and I'm looking up like, what did they say? What are the lyrics? So I'm like a rare bird. I know most people like music and that's usually, but I'm just, I have small children. So I'm like, gosh, what I wouldn't give for a little quiet. So I'm pretty silent. And I do a lot of copywriting too. So it's hard to like write copy and then I hear something. I'm like, wait, what was I thinking? So I'm a silent person. I'm boring.
I listen to, this is going to sound funny. When I write, at least for a while, I haven't done this in a minute, but I do a lot of writing for our projects, and I'll listen to the Friday Night Lights soundtrack. Something about explosions in the sky and those electric guitar parts just really gets me going. I don't know, but then when I'm editing, I don't know. I can't listen. You can't listen to music and edit video because music ends up being a part of what we're making. And so if I'm in the beginning phases of a project where I'm sifting through footage and I'm putting things together, I'll try to queue up, like we use, for example, like the music bed would be a place we would go to find music for our projects. And I'll like just stream music from the music bed that I feel like is in the right kind of mood or tone or whatever, so that like as I'm editing, I'm actually kind of subconsciously thinking, would that work for this or whatever. So double tap anyway. Yeah.
Another question is, what project you've worked on that you're most proud of? Do any of you guys have like, that's mine kind of attitude?
I can't share it yet.
Oh,
It's something I just did a few weeks ago. It's definitely, I mean, and that's the point. It's like, I feel like every project that you work on, you should be more proud of than the next one. I mean, because with everyone, you grow so much and you learn so many new tricks or whatever. So I think just finding a purpose in it. So there's a project that I just recently did that, was probably my biggest challenge, and I kind of avoided it for so long. So I just kind of finished it 2 weeks ago. So you'll see it in a few weeks. Stay tuned. That's my commercial, I guess.
do you guys have a kind of when you're working with a client, one of the questions is, how do you guys handle design feedback, especially if it's negative design feedback? How do you guys handle that? Anyone?
These two never get negative design feedback. What are you talking about?
No, I mean, I think that I always have to remember that the things we're making, it's not like I'm an artist making things that are for myself, that are out there in the world or whatever. I'm making things for other people. And at the end of the day, they're paying us to make them for them. And so like, I never want to put myself at the front of the line when it comes to who's going to have the first say in these things. I mean, I think that we do get paid also because the client has liked the other stuff we've done for other people. And so I don't want to just be spineless and just do whatever anybody says. Like I want to, usually my way of navigating those things is I say something like, it's a great suggestion. Let's try that out. Or let's look at a couple different options. Or I try to get at the root of what I think when a client tries to solve a design problem, if they're not a designer, what they're reacting to is something that's not working. Yeah. And they want to solve it for you. But if you can sort of unwind what's not working in their mind, you might have a better way to solve the thing that's not working. And it might not be the way that they're suggesting solving it. But to just say that you got to like it is just ignoring their feedback. And that's not going to make them get over the thing that they think is not working.
That kind of goes back to that 20% bigger, or making that logo bigger thing, because I feel like here's the backstory behind that. The client's going to say that for one of two reasons. They're going to say it. Some clients are going to say it just because they want to feel like they have hands in the project, like that they directed something, like they changed something. And if that's the case, you're going to know that after a while working with that client, and you're going to present the project with the logo 20% smaller so that you can make it bigger to make them happy. But then there's other clients who are going to say, make the logo bigger because they're looking at it and they're like, I don't think it's going to have brand recognition. Are people going to know that it's me? Does it look too much like my other client, the other competitors? So you kind of have to have that conversation. If you're getting negative feedback or negative design critiques, it's more about like, instead of just feeling, it's so easy as perfectionists and wanting to always be, have it all perfect and look the best. But you're on a team with that person. Like, don't think of them as this all client. Like, have a conversation with them. Like, what are they missing? Like, what can you do to make this better for all of you? I've had tons of design negative feedback that I was just like, oh, this is going to be crazy, but I guess I'll do it. And then I do it and I'm like, yeah, it's so much better. They were right. It's like, I don't always want to say that, but sometimes it just leads to a much better path that you couldn't see because you didn't have that collaboration. So I think negative feedback can actually lead to some beautiful things in the end. You know, even though your first reaction is to be like, how dare you?
I don't always think it's negative. I think it's just
Mhm.
it's not working, like Rob said. So how do you kind of go backwards and figure out how to solve that problem? We are communication people. We communicate visually. And so being able to solve that problem, even if, you know, takes us on a different path than we thought we were going to go on, I think is very essential, and it helps us grow. Go ahead, Imani.
No, I was saying, I think the ability you just mentioned is sort of like I leave a lot of room for criticism. So like sometimes I don't give the client everything I was thinking at first. I just give them enough to because I need them to communicate with me. And really 9 times out of 10, they don't know what they want until they see it. So I give them enough for them to have a critical response, and then that gives me more information, because most times the initial information that I got from them typically isn't enough. And so what I'm working with is sort of like I'm just giving them enough for them to respond to me and give me more information. So I don't typically I don't look at criticism as negative unless they just said, you know, were to look at it and say, you know, you're the worst designer ever. Don't ever touch my work ever again. You know, unless they're trying to insult me, then I just assume that whatever it is, information they give me is just going to help the project. So actually what I do is I don't give them, 90%. I give sometimes I go in 70 and see what the feedback comes back as, and then I take it to the next step. And then when they see what I really was planning on doing, they say, oh, this is amazing, And so it's kind of a trick of mine.
Very interesting. Any last parting words or advice for your fellow students to keep them motivated?
Just stay curious, try new things, go for jobs that you maybe think are out of your league or whatever, even if it's just the experience of the job interview, like just try new things, meet new people is huge. Like meeting people, unfortunately we can't, be in person a lot, but even at these Zoom calls, asking the questions and being involved, I think is going to go really far for you. So
thank you, Melissa.
Make a lot of things. The next thing you make is probably better than the thing that you are making right now. So finish things, make things.
Good advice. Thank you, Rob. Imani, have any last thoughts?
Don't be afraid to say yes. My first job in newspaper was literally a phone call, and they asked me, do I know how to use or lay out a newspaper? And I said yes, and then I got the job, and then I went to my library and picked up a book on how to lay out newspapers. So don't be afraid to take a risk, and you might have to say yes before you're ready, but don't be afraid to do that.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate all the time and effort you guys did for this. There's some great links in the comment sections. If you guys haven't checked those out, please check those out. Imani, thank you. Melissa, thank you. Rob, thank you. We appreciate you taking the time to do this today.
thank you, Carey.
You're welcome, and thank you for asking.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, guys.